Hello, good morning, good afternoon to all of my beautiful listeners out there today. I am so excited, I'll say it again, to have the beautiful and a very dear friend of mine on today's show. And we caught up a good few weeks ago, and I just knew that there's so many people out there that are going to really benefit from hearing Matt's voice and Matt's message that he's bringing into the world. One of many, but particularly right now, I think is super relevant to the men out there and how they can fully open up their hearts and live a far more authentic life. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Amazing. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for having me. And hello to all the listeners out there.
Oh, thank you so much for joining. So who are you, my love? Let's have a little beautiful introduction about yourself. I know you've been on a previous podcast with me, but this is a very different kind of vibe, and we are both different humans. So who are you today?
I'd say where I'm at this point in my life, I'm just a man. I'm just a human who's trying to show up and be the best version of myself always. But if you want to go back and look at all of the things I've done over the last few years, I'd say that right now I'm a somatic specialist and I'm specializing in microdosing around sexuality. So I've done multiple somatic kind of studies in holotropic breathwork, rebirthing breathwork, yin, sexuality schools, intimacy, all of these spaces. And it's kind of all been leading and kind of like merging into this space of psychedelics and how we can support men to understand their body, become more aware of their body, men and women. But I'm specifically focusing on trying to support men in understanding how they can remove porn from their life, step more into their hearts, and create healthier behaviors and kind of ditch their trauma.
Okay, so wow, what kind of brought you into this work around particularly weaning men off porn? Is that something
Yeah.
relatable to yourself, or where's this kind of come from?
Yeah, I'd say it's like, me actually picking probably one of the biggest challenges on the planet at the moment and doing one of the most rebellious things I can do at the moment, which is, understand the power of psychedelics and microdosing, be respectful to that plant medicine by just only working with small amounts. And by targeting such a large issue and bringing awareness to that. And that's kind of the state of male sexuality, the shame that we have around porn, and the challenges that a lot of men are facing. And also, just where we're at as humans these days, like, you don't even have to have a large amount of trauma to be using porn. Like the volatility that's happening on our planet at the moment, any sensitive person that's really open in their heart, it can be enough for them that they just want to disconnect. And like, porn is a great way to do that. But it also can be quite a tragic rabbit hole. And I think, we can go back into this in a little bit of my backstory as well. But I was a veteran in the army for 10 years. I served in Afghanistan and I used porn in Afghanistan for 6 months. So, I had a huge relationship, and can get really messy when other emotions and our safety and our fear and our intimacy, and we start creating patterns around porn. They can really have huge impacts in who we are as people, but most importantly, our capacity to really connect deeply with our partners.
Yeah, and I guess obviously you were going through such an intense time. I cannot even imagine your time during Afghanistan. But how did you find porn kind of helped you, or I don't know, what kind of aid did it give you during that time?
Yeah, I'd say it's just dopamine, like, thinking versus feeling. If we're thinking, we're in a form of dopamine. If we're watching porn or if we're kind of like living from a reward loop system from the past, we're kind of not really present. If we're waking up every day and we're thinking about a coffee, a cigarette, porn, etc., these are the loops that our mind is actually using to calculate how we felt in the past and to keep us out of the present moment. So, it's a kind of sneaky protection mechanism from our mind to keep us safe from possible threats or heartbreak, etc., in the moment. And it's kind of like one of the saddest things is that reason why men might be using porn or we have trauma is that we actually have these like upset hearts underneath, or from where it's our inner child or our younger teenager, that men are carrying this kind of level of sensitivity for their heart, which then can be turned into patterns later on around porn use and all sorts of addictions as well.
And for you then, how did you wean yourself off after the 6 months? How did that stop? What did that look like?
Um, yeah, well, that was like probably part of what I can teach from and speak from is that I didn't really wean myself off. It followed me home. My partner at the time I'd been with for, our relationship went for 8 years, and it was me coming back from war, and I couldn't be present in my body. I couldn't be present with the sensations. I think I was rocketed about 270 times in a 6 month period. So I had 270 fight or flight responses in my body that I hadn't really felt, that I disconnected from and disassociated from. So that's a level of fear that was within my nervous system. And to truly make love and be intimate with somebody, um, you know, you would be able to tap into that or feel that or start processing that. So, there's some sexual energy is a really powerful energy that can really bring up our emotions or allow us to actually connect into what's really below the surface. So to have sexual energy is kind of something that wouldn't be serving me. So to continue my porn use when I got home was actually a protection mechanism to stay away from that large amount of energy that I'd stored in my body.
And how did you know you had 270 of those with, I don't know what words you just
Yeah,
used, but how did you
270
know it
rocket
for
attacks is. I was on one of the largest
yeah.
bases in Afghanistan, in Kandahar, um, and yeah, we probably
Wow.
got 5, 6 rockets a day. I just did quick math of us getting bombed nearly every day of the deployment. I think the first couple of months they didn't because there was a border that was closed, but pretty much for 6 months it was 4 or 5 rockets a day. So you basically become disassociated to it. It's kind of like, being in a domestic violence relationship or any kind of like unhealthy relationship. You just kind of build up a level of immunity to it. But it doesn't mean that it's not hurting or disconnecting you, or that you don't have to process it at some point as well too.
And that must at the time been quite like a daunting and intimidating thing for you to face, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the
Before.
days when I started to actually, really step into um, embodiment and spirituality. And I'd lived in Bali for 2 years, and I come back from Australia, and I'd be meditating, and I was feeling this 270 rocket attacks in my body, and it was scary. Like, it was like the fear of death times 1,000. And it took a lot of like practice and a lot of understanding of my own inner psyche and understanding the subtleties of how trauma works in our nervous system, the relationship between the mind and the body and the nervous system, to be able to move through that and integrate. So, I guess one of the reasons I say that I'm a somatic specialist is because I've been through these really, really deep states of trauma, and I've been lucky enough to be able to integrate that, come back, have an open heart now, be balanced in my capacity to have a regulated nervous system and keep my heart open is like nothing short of a miracle. So it's like, yeah, I have a level of responsibility to be able to pass that information on to other people as well.
And so how did you mentioned you went back to Australia, you started meditating, tapping into your body. How did you even start that? Because that's a massive shift from going from where you are to there. Like, what actually led you to sit with this and to actually open up your heart and start doing that?
I feel like a lot of people on the spiritual path, they have kind of like an inbuilt survival mechanism where they're moving in one direction, and that's survival. And then the mind will get to a point where they're like, wow, I can't have benders every night for the rest of my life. Something's going to happen, and there's a kind of like a critical breaking point of survival where we then turn around and become back in a survival mechanism, but we're moving in the other direction. So I'd left the military when that kind of survival switch happened within inside myself. I was in corporate. I was in very unhealthy masculinity, alcohol, partying, benders, drugs, mistreating my own sexuality as well too, and the sexuality of other people. And in that struggle was basically my, awakening, and for me to move back towards, what is healthier version of me, but I'm still in a state of survival. I'm still kind of moving in the opposite direction. It probably took like a good number of years to hop off that survival. So it's like, okay, cool. I'm moving in that direction. I want to move in that direction, but I don't have to move in that direction from place of survival anymore. I can switch that off. Like, I'm safe. I can hop into my body. I can be relaxed. And yes, I can still move in this direction, but I can move at a different tempo as well.
And did you have like a good support network around you? Because that's super important with that kind of massive shift in your life.
Yeah, like I feel yes and no. Like I had a partner at the time. It was like a very amazing human that was supporting me through my challenges. Um, and so, dearly grateful for that human who, yeah, really showed up for me, and, allowed me to move through those aspects of myself. And, I wouldn't recommend dating a war veteran. Let the war veteran be the war veteran, let the war veteran go through his own healing process. Don't try and, think that you can change a war veteran or heal a war veteran. Um, you know, I'd say if there's any listeners out there, avoid the war veteran as a partner. Yeah, and until they've done a lot of
You
work
heard
and
it
healed.
first.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
as appealing as those men can be, yes, obviously there's a lot of trauma there for people to move past. I had some great healers. Like I've always had the top notch spiritual healers, embodiment teachers in my life. Like I think that's maybe one of the agreements that I had, that I was going to get that traumatized because I was going to have the best healers in the world. Um, and yeah, like no joke, I've always had like the most amazing support people in my team that have always kind of brought me back to life. And I've spent a lot of money on self development. I've spent over $100,000 in healings and retreats and facilitation training, and ayahuasca and heading to the jungle and all of these things. So I'm super grateful that I've been able to come back to this balanced state now. You can't really put a price on your health, but yeah, it's definitely. Um, there's key moments though when you're actually really alone in those spaces as well too. So yeah, I've had a good support network, but at the end of the day, it's just you and the universe. And it takes you to have that strong relationship with yourself and that internal dialogue and relationship with your own inner being and your own inner core, that the rest of the thing that's happening around you is kind of like noise. Yeah.
totally. Oh my goodness. And so you've obviously, like I said, you've been blessed. You've had so many great support. And I know, yeah, where you are and the people around you are absolute magic, from the ones that I've met and been lucky to work with too. How do you now help men? I guess, say there's like a woman that is with a man in this situation, or a man that is like, oh my gosh, something is starting to make sense. What
Yeah.
would be the first thing you would suggest that they take as a step?
It's unique, it's unique to every being. I think that that's probably one of the greatest gifts that we can understand as coaches or support people, is like to listen and really come up with a unique piece of advice, or more importantly, not even give advice, give them the capacity for them to have the awakening, the realization of what their next step is. So that's the ultimate, is a level of empowerment in being able to support people to have their own inner guidance to be able to arrive at their next step. Um, but then, the next step is so like unique for every single person, that we can't just give one piece of advice. And to hand that out, and if I had to, I'd just say meditation. Meditation is like, it's key. It's going to put us into a state of neuroplasticity. So we're probably going to talk about microdosing in this podcast later, but ultimately meditation and microdosing, pretty the same thing. Like you're creating a sense of awareness, you're creating a sense of neuroplasticity, you're creating the capacity for change, is meditation as well. But we can also access that via plants in this life as well too. So we don't want to be constantly needing plants as resources, but we can actually have meditation as a constant resource within our life that can allow us to maneuver through this world. And as I spoke about earlier in the podcast, that it's challenging. We've got like Israel that's happening at the moment, and there's always something going on in the planet where our hearts are being pulled, or there's a fire, or there's an earthquake, and there's a lot of chaos these days. Meditation is your tool to stay grounded. So I know not a lot of people love to hear that, like meditate, 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 but ultimately, that's probably what makes me a cool coach, is that I've got all these like tools to help people be able to embody and integrate a level of meditation as well too.
So then, where does psilocybin come in this whole journey for you?
Um,
How did you meet this piece?
Yeah, I think I'm a somatic specialist, and I've actually had a very limited exposure to plant medicine, in a sense of, I've done ayahuasca 4 times. And after the first time I did ayahuasca, it was 2.5 years till I did my next
Oh,
journey.
really?
Yeah, and that's because that's how long it took me to integrate, and I was really aware and really tuned into that. And then with magic mushrooms, I've probably done 10 journeys of magic mushroom and microdosing. And I guess from the level of awareness that I've already had from doing these plant medicines, it's really allowed me to see them in multiple angles, and then also allow me to apply my skills in somatic specialist to like the art of microdosing as well. Ultimately, um, plants are an ally, and I've connected and done lots of dayetas with lots of plants in the last 2 or 3 years, and we're using those allies as a resource to be able to up level our life and create stability and healthier patterns. And then, that's great if you can have that resource, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to put as much structure around that plan ally as you can. And you want to respect that plan ally by showing up and supporting and working with it. And also, you want to get intentional around the container and the structure that you're creating for your microdosing experience as well, too. So, psilocybin is kind of like something I'm passionate about because one, it's emerging, but two, I know that there's a lot of veterans out there that are going to probably move into the psychedelic space. And I want to make sure that there's advocates out there that are speaking for healthy integration of plant medicine, embodying. We don't want a veteran community just be sitting in ayahuasca circles and doing 50 ayahuasca journeys and integrating for the next 20 years. You want them to actually understand, what values and ethoses that they can do from healing and integrating somatic aspects and nervous system regulation and all of these things, plus, the beauty of plant allies as well too.
Yeah, I love that you touched on that point that you had a 2.5 year time to integrate because people don't talk about that enough, like the extent for integration. And everyone, like you said, you don't give advice, it's everyone's personal experience. But at what point did you feel you knew this was something for you to teach and help veterans in particular? Was there a moment where you were like, this makes sense what I'm here to help with?
Um, yeah, I think that like I was showing quite a large vision from ayahuasca in my most recent
Mm.
journey to Peru. So on the last night in ceremony, she just basically sat me down and fed me this big vision. And a lot of this vision is kind of
Oh,
what we're talking about today. So it's kind of like a direct transmission from the jungle. And now I'm just kind of like slowly piecing the pieces of that vision together and how that's actually looking. And that's seeing me move to LA. So I've been speaking with one of the largest psilocybin growers in California, and then they're looking to champion a microdosing school for veterans. And we're going to do basically large trauma informed, or create a trauma informed microdosing school that hopefully is going to see enough upskilling of humans that are already in the somatic space and already trauma informed, upskill themselves to then be able to hold safe containers of small amounts of microdosing, mainly psilocybin, for veterans, to be able to support them on their journey, and to be able to slowly start to understand the power of these plant allies and how to integrate them into their lives and how they can make change. And I've like, there's been some really beautiful examples of that where some of my clients have gone from being stuck in bed, couldn't get out of bed, to a new lease on life in probably less than 3 weeks. Some people that have been in really stuck, really stuck, deep depressions, and after 3 weeks of microdosing, back cooking healthy food, looking after themselves, moving their body, getting outside, taking the dog for a walk, and have like a huge, like fresh, like view of life, and have movement and momentum again. And I'm not advocating for microdosing to be anything other than it is. I'm not here to say, microdosing is this and that. Microdosing will only be what it will be, but let's just show up for it in the most powerful way and give it the most amount of respect by, planning and kind of, understanding ourselves as humans. And, kind of how I work with that is understanding like a bit of a behavioral balance, in the sense of we have at different states of neurotransmitters. So we spoke about porn being dopamine earlier, but we also have like serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. And you can kind of like ask a person where their behaviors are at and understand archetypally who they are, what the trauma story might be from the behaviors that they have. And then in the behaviors that they have, you can then suggest new behaviors to them that can counteract or balance those particular behaviors. So, ultimately, one of the first things you probably want to do in a microdosing protocol is bring to somebody's awareness all of the places that they're making quick dopamine. And you want to replace that with some slow dopamine and maybe some endorphins and some oxytocin, and give them a balanced kind of like experience of what it is to be in all these archetypal energies. Their masculinity, their femininity. We don't have to necessarily give them super woo woo names, but it's just basically being in balance, the capacity to feel, the capacity to think, not to think about porn or think about things outside of themselves. Think about, what are realistic goals that they can be achieving and how they can be achieving them in like a regular way, or how can they feel sensations in their body that are healthy and for them, or how can they create a level of safety and oxytocin through touch, through their own practices and their own behavior, and build trust and lasting relationships with their internal nervous system. So these are some of the tools and resources available to humans that, with like a trained practitioner or the right person, can be pointed out to them to take with the microdosing. And then in this state of neuroplasticity, we have a capacity to really create some really healthy behaviors that can go way beyond when the microdosing stops as well too.
And for anyone listening out there that doesn't understand what neuroplasticity is, what would you say? How would you say that process works, and explain that as well?
I'd say let's just explain it like a web browser. So you've got your Chrome browser open, you've got lots of tabs open from the past, and those tabs are kind of like pathways in the brain. And then ultimately, with microdosing, we can kind of close off some of those tabs. And some of those tabs might be trauma, they might be embarrassment, they might be safety protection mechanisms, things that are kind of outdated from the past. They might even be in a totally different browser system that we don't even understand. It might be like, prefrontal cortex baby emotions and these things that are not serving us, that are still wired in our mind, but we don't actually really have any, logical or language to put towards them, but they're still kind of there. And we can start to close them off. And in the extra resources that we have in the web browser, then we can start to open up new tabs. So then we can open up new tabs because we have more energy, we have more resources, we have less energy kind of going in certain directions. We also probably have like a balance of energy too. We have the right distribution of energy from our mind to our body, and from our body back to our mind as well too. So I think that that's a really large part of like healthy behavioral and decision making for humans, or somebody who comes from a place of addiction. If a male is, ejaculating a lot, let's just say you're watching porn, let's say that some guys are watching porn 2, 3 times a day for months on end, your endocrine system, your hormones are going to be out of whack because you've only got, a certain amount of nutrients within your body. So then ultimately, is your endocrine system going to be able to talk properly? Are your emotions going to be able to function? Are you going to start to have worry and anxiety because your body's actually telling you you can't keep doing what you're doing? Are you going to not listen to that and then watch more porn to outrun that? Like, it can become in a pretty toxic cycle. So understanding your nutritional profile and some really amazing superfoods that exist out there to support your neurotransmitters with the microdosing can really help humans actually embed really healthy behaviors as well too.
And then what would you also suggest in this process, that they go on like a semen retention journey as well? Or what is your view on that side of things?
Yeah, well, once again, it depends on like who a person is and what their challenges are. I'd say for optimum health, vitality, and like love life and attraction to your partner, your beloved, whatever body type they are, male, female, transgender, etc. Semen retention for male-bodied humans that have like a penis anatomy is really powerful. It's powerful for our vitality. It's powerful for our heart to remain open and for us to be in more of a state of coherence with our partners. Our heart being open and our hearts being able to feel one another with our partner is like very valuable. And if we're kind of like leaking all of our energy from our sacral, basically that energy coming up into our heart is, struggles to be there. Um, and you can see this kind of happen, I think, naturally when a child's born into the world. So obviously, when a child's born, people stop having sex. and then the parents get really into their heart, and their heart opens up, and there's so much love going to the child that then the male is kind of like, you know, not so occupied with sex anymore. Obviously, the female's body is going through a recovery process, but naturally, you can see states of this happening in society when, you know, a male is in his heart's open and it's like shining in the right direction. Sex becomes like a little bit of a plan B. And then that's kind of like that energy that's like really serving a connection where you're not making just about sexual intimacy with your partner for connection. You're actually in a genuine state of connection. You're actually able to hear them and listen to them and have coherence through your heart being open is very powerful. And, you know, we can be honest, quitting anything these days is challenging. Quitting coffee, you know, actually embedding a microdosing, embedding meditation into your day to day life can be challenging. And then that's where the power of microdosing comes in, that it kind of just like shortcuts, closes down, makes heaps more resources available. You can embed these behaviors into your life.
Oh,
You're
so good.
excited, aren't you?
And so yeah, I know. I will stop saying that. Um, but I think also touching upon the point that you say when people raise children that sex can become plan B, are you saying potentially that you're not saying people will stop having sex, right? Like, what kind of then does that start to look like when people wean themselves off porn, right? I know, like you said, it's unique for different people, but can you give an example,
Yeah, I'd say
yeah,
that, you know,
that's all.
probably one of the biggest things in a journey for semen retention for males is that as we start to build our sexual energy up, all of our emotions, all of our neediness, our little boy, all of this stuff is going to have to come up and be felt and seen by ourselves. So, semen retention is actually kind of like a form of self mastery, emotional mastery, and it will turn you into a man. You know, if you can master your own sexual energy, you'll be able to master your emotions. And in that space of you being a man, you become more desirable from a woman as well. So it's kind of like a, you know, and I'm using kind of like, you know, polarity based terms here, but, you know, I'm speaking on, you know, just, you know, in a language that I like to use. So, you know, anyone else that's listening out there that likes to associate different language, amazing. This is the language I'm going to use. But it's like in that dynamic of a man and a woman having this kind of polarity between them that can exist, and it can be man, man, etc. That openness and that sexual energy that's moving through their body actually creates a space for more sex and more intimacy, but it comes less from a place of sympathetic nervous system arousal, more from a place of parasympathetic arousal. Because it's like as you move the sexual energy up into your heart opens. You know, there's a space of you not being in trauma anymore, you not being in a space of fight or flight, you're in a space of co-regulation with yourself and the earth, and you're grounded in your parasympathetic nervous system. So then you're actually like connecting with your partner in a state of less goal orientated, less ejaculation orientated, and more in a space of genuine connection, which can include pleasure, which then can include more like perpetual energy in a sense of, you know, a cervical orgasm versus a clitoris orgasm can generate more energy in the body for a woman, and the same for a man. Like if a man can still be in his pleasure and actually hold his semen retention, so you can still orgasm as a male and not ejaculate your semen, or you can just stop. Like, you know, so there's no actual desire for you to go into the dopamine reward loop of last time I did this with a woman that I got so much reward out of the dopamine. So that dopamine reward loop is gone. So then, like, you're sitting in your body and your body's literally vibrating with this like potential of sexual energy, of eros, of life force in you, which, you know, makes it easy to get your purpose. It makes it easy for you to then be still super attractive to your partner, and you wake up the next day and you're available for sex again. Like you're available for sex 5 minutes later,
Mhm.
or 10 minutes later again as well too. And you know, then it's like an individual relationship for each person to be able to um, like go on their own journey with like intentional ejaculation, or what does that look like, or what are your value systems. So everyone's different, and you know, there's so many different paths for men to be able to um, move in that direction, but ultimately they just need to choose it and start. That's it. You know, choose it, start, Who doesn't want to have emotional mastery? Who doesn't want to master their sexual energy? Who doesn't want to be the best version of yourself in your life and get your purpose? And if these are the things that you're not choosing, well, then why? Like, why are you not choosing your best life? Like, what belief systems or what mindset blocks do you have that are stopping you from actually wanting to choose that and claim your best life?
And do you help people work through those blocks as well, like to start off with?
Not really. Like, I don't really do much one-on-one work anymore. Like, I'll be honest,
Mm.
like my kind of desire is more of a cultural shift and cultural changes. I do like men's retreats where I run like a whole weekend program of dropping men deeply into their body. And there's huge change in that. So it's like a whole somatic experience that's happening over 3 days, and we're really creating a potent space for men to be able to rewire the nervous system and their relationships with their heart, and teaching them how to mother themselves. I think healthy masculinity looks at one of the keys of that is men being able to mother themselves and having that mother energy for themselves, their own relationship with their own inner heart, all these things. So then they're not relying on the woman. That's kind of, I guess, beautiful to receive it, but not something you need from her. It's not an unconscious need to be mothered from her. It's nice to receive that, affection or that kind of level of intimacy from your connection or beloved, but you don't need that because there's going to be times in her life. This is another example. If she's having kids, you can't go up to your wife and say, "Mother me," when she's got three kids in her bed hanging off her as well, too. So, you know, yeah, it's like in that 3 day retreat, really teaching men how to drop into their body and like be, with their deepest trauma as well and upgrade their lives. So those things I'm passionate about. Cultural shifts around how, one of the things that I did previously was like plant-based iron for women, like a vegan plant-based iron for women. It's 1.8 billion women on the planet that have low iron. And, before that, large kind of training programs around like PTSD on Insight Timer and making large, teaching men how to put their message out into the world. So kind of like my eros or my desire in life is to put my energy towards more cultural shifts. And I think that me being in the psychedelic space at the moment is me trying to create and give permission to other people to step into this space, but step into it in a safe way, and understand the skills and the resources they need, but also like bringing a unique lived experience element into it. I think that there is quite a large amount of medical professionals that are moving into the psychedelic space at the moment. And some of the conversations I've had with some medical like professionals are quite concerning. And the level of, embodied empathy or understanding or experience that they have around somebody with like say PTSD or CPTSD is probably bit off the mark. And I see that, somatic psychology or trauma informed somatic practitioners are really kind of these experts that are allowing people to move through deep states of trauma. And it's like, well, what if you empowered those people that are already like wielding like really powerful somatic processes and trauma informed language and processes, and then empowered them with, another ally to support them, and doing it in a safe way. It's like we're not becoming like shamans and taking people on deep journeys, or advocating for non-indigenous people to serve ayahuasca, etc. We're just like supporting a safe access to a plant that's freely available in their environment, in their community, all across Australia, but then that they can actually learn and use in a effective way.
Ugh. And so, why do you think maybe now the medical industry is starting to look into potentially these things? Because these have been shamed for years for so many different reasons. Do you think there's a particular shift that's happening now that's really bringing this to light?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like you guys would have, audience, you would have witnessed this inside yourself. We have these pendulum swings. So, if you're a highly
Mm.
logical thinking person, then, surprise, surprise, 30 years later, when your Saturn return comes, you're going to go deep into your emotions for 3 years and you're having a rebalancing. And then, you go from this highly logical person into a balanced, integrated human where you can be in your emotions and your thoughts and you're on the middle path. And this is what, all the great sages and teachers talk to, is the middle path. When the energy of the planet kind of
Mm.
grabs psychedelics and puts it in this box, then it naturally needs to swing back to the other side. And it seems like it's swinging back quite hard at the moment. And like it's going to go, we can see that with weed and cannabis in America, or, Zurich or Switzerland where I was, where it's just kind of like CBD and weeds everywhere now. And it's like just full freely available. It's like, there's more weed at the Quickie Mart or the 7-Eleven than there is like chocolate and soft drink these days. And that's just like an overcorrection. And then I think, eventually we'll find this middle path. If I have to look at it from with a bias, a particular bias, one of the biases that it's like been running through my head is like big pharma and those people are just wanting to like use psychedelics as a way to disconnect people from actually reality of where it's at. Because reality is like quite warped, that then these particular mushrooms and stuff can actually come and then like protect the person. So, I know we give like SSRIs and other kind of particular medications a really bad rap, but when somebody's actually really struggling to like grasp reality, one of the things you want is a filter to come over reality. And ultimately, our ego can really filter our reality, but then also substances can filter our reality as well too. So it's not like our choice on a soul level to ever shame or judge somebody who's looking to filter the sensitivity from reality, because that's a unique choice that a soul can make. But ultimately, that's what big pharma could be doing. Like they could be messing up the world and then giving people, um, you know, psychedelics as a way to kind of like, okay, I'm happy for a few months, but then not fully integrate it and then go back into having more. And you probably would have seen like kind of like sci-fi documentaries of people in these weird timelines and movies and stuff where they're taking like these clickers and they like, they start to get a heightened emotion. They take a clicker and it's like, is this a start? Like, are we going to see a planet where everyone's just microdosing and not actually really integrating or embodied in, the potential to be human or, you know, um, I don't know where it's going to head. These are some of the thought processes that I've had or what I'm looking at. But, ultimately, there's some pretty magical properties in these substances that, science has not been able to match. And, they're basically coming back to psychedelics is because nature is, it's the ultimate healer. And yeah, or it's the ultimate provider. So, they're looking to just mimic nature and basically create abundance, create control, and also supporting humans to just live in a more dysfunctional way, I'd say.
That's actually quite scary. Like, I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't think big
Yeah.
pharma's really had a really solid like invested interest in holistic health. And as humans, we thrive when we're holistically healthy. And taking a synthetic strain of ayahuasca or magic mushrooms isn't really going to support our overall health or wellness. It could be a small part of it, but yeah, let's see where it goes.
Oh my gosh. And but you obviously, I think the mission that you're creating and the community that you're around, like there is a lot of hope out there as well that it can change in different directions
Yeah,
for sure.
I kind of like nearly see
Yeah.
psychedelics as kind of like the last frontier for humanity. Like, if we're really getting super honest and serious, like, let's have a look at where the world is and where we're at in a state of choosing health and wellness for ourselves, and the power that like is in these plants and in these plant allies is like unmatched on the planet for healing, for like the level of trauma healing. And let's just say the pendulum does swing back, so we can see on one side the pendulum is quite extreme with the amount of people that have trauma and aware of their trauma, and then also we have a pendulum swinging the other way around towards psychedelics, that those could be some very unique meeting point in time and space where humanity is kind of like up leveled.
Can you imagine how great that would be?
Definitely, yeah, it's a it's a possibility. It's also not,
Yes.
it's not one I have attachment to, but it's kind of like one that I'm, advocating for, and would be pretty cool to witness. And I just think the subtleties that exist in access to plant medicines and the way that they've helped me reconnect back with, those the inner subtleties of what it is to be human has been really powerful. To speak specifically around my experience with plant medicines, first time I did ayahuasca, she was very she's all about my mother and where my mum hadn't loved me, but a lot of it was about that mother energy that I spoke of before, intimacy, my own intimacy, and the work that I did to move into an intimacy school and work on my own sexuality, my own relationship with my body, my own secure attachment style, come from that first ayahuasca journey, and that was the integration. That's why the integration took 2.5 years, because I had to go learn how to mother myself. That's what she was teaching me. She's like, go mother yourself. You don't know how to mother yourself. Your mum didn't teach you. And I had to, really get serious with that. And how that looks for a guy is like being on your floor crying to realize that the reason that you neglect yourself and other people is because your mum neglected you because she neglected herself. If you get really real when you see some relationships between like parents and sons, that even a mother is like, some of the best mums I've ever seen, the most caring, passionate mums, are loving their children so much, but they're not loving themselves. And the kid doesn't actually see, as a male, he's not looking at her and being like, wow, you're loving me so much. He's looking at her getting a blueprint of like, oh, this is how I love myself. I just give everything to somebody else and leave nothing for myself. And that's the blueprint that we're receiving. So, that was my ayahuasca journey, and that was really beautiful to go learn and integrate and understand. And I think that the people that I connect with these days are like appreciative of my mother energy. Um, and even like in my community, I can flex that a little bit. It's like a really beautiful capacity as a male to have. And as I said, I use it a lot in the healing spaces that I create. In my journeys with psilocybin, I remember one psilocybin connection that I had. I connected back with a craving of food. Like I had a craving that was so subtle. It was like a hash brown, and I needed a hash brown, and it was like spelled out in bold, like hash brown, hash brown, hash brown. And I was like, wow. Like after the military, I didn't really give like a f what I ate. Like just like be eating for fuel because I just disassociated from my craving, that disassociated from my intuition and all of the subtleties of what it is to be human, to have certain cravings and desires, had been switched off after the military. And that's quite common. We're like a walking robot who's, being conditioned. So then psilocybin is really powerful to connect me back into those subtleties and understand like, oh, I actually do have cravings, and I do have the capacity to feel my desires in my own body and to express them and to recreate those neural pathways to back to my original blueprint of who I was. Yeah.
And then did you then find that quite like intimidating? Like, oh my God, I'm craving food. Like that's something so subtle, but what did that wake you up to realize you'd been in that robot mentality for so long?
Um, yeah, like, I understand the nature of the military, and, I've got to take some ownership there and responsibility that there was a younger, dumber part of me that signed up for that. So, I can't go
I
into
was going to
victim
ask
mode.
you,
It's just,
yeah.
once I get the awareness, it's like, oh, cool, I now know what a craving is. I think like on a deeper journey I had with psilocybin, I actually got to the bottom of some overwhelm from a relationship with my mother. I think that I've had past tendencies for addiction when I was overwhelmed in the past. And that had a lot to do with my nervous system not regulating with my mum. It was like my mum's nervous system regulating my overwhelm and teaching me how to calm my overwhelm down. I don't think I got that from her. And like I've had an experience of going back in psilocybin to experience little baby me being overwhelmed and crying and like, releasing that. But it was like, the power of these plant medicines is that they can actually go in and teach us the subtlety or release the capacity or give us the capacity to re-regulate our nervous system on deep subtle levels, like from a baby like experience to then okay, I know how to show up for myself in overwhelm. And while we're on the topic of psychedelics here, I can give a really good example of that. Is I did some buffo, which is another frog medicine that you
Oh,
smoke. Yeah, it's quite powerful. And I only did a little handshake of it, and that was intentional because I don't do many psychedelics. But this come into my life, it was there. I had to honor it. Like a really good friend of mine was really initiated into that medicine, so it'd be silly of me not to have that experience. But I didn't want to do too much because I am there to, I'm still integrating my last ayahuasca ceremony from Peru. But in that, I had a really quite an intense experience where I went into this waiting room, and in the waiting room, it can be described as kind of like being lucid in a lucid state, but you're conscious and you're aware, but you're kind of in this void like experience, but you haven't like fully crossed
mm,
over, or the ego hasn't fully let go. And Bullfrog can be quite expansive in the way that it's kind of like if you were thinking about having a universal experience through ayahuasca, it's a bit slower, but because you're smoking Bullfrog, it's a lot faster. So the intensity that I felt in my nervous system was a lot. And in that state, in that moment, I come in with my own mother language and my own capacity to regulate myself. And I said to myself, it's okay. It's a lot. You're going to be all right. You're okay. Just breathe. Like you're in this traumatized state. And it was like, through this journey, all I was ever really finding out was my capacity to be with myself, to regulate myself, to have that communication. And, I probably didn't receive that from my mother as much as I needed to in some critical aspects of my childhood for me to really be able to get to the bottom of that. And psychedelics have just been a great window, or great increase in awareness for me to be able to really tap in and understand those subtleties that are driving kind of larger sets of behaviors in my life. I don't think any addict wants to go out and use substances, but they're in a state of overwhelm. They just want the overwhelm to stop. They just want the pain to stop, or they just want to actually be free of that. So it's like, you know and it's not like something you can just get your journal out and be like, this is I feel like this, because like blah blah blah. And you're not just like journal entering why your nervous system's dysregulated from your mum before prefrontal cortex. And it's like, plant medicines are, such a powerful tool for us to be able to go in there and look and understand these things, and then also take that forward and integrate it into our life, and really show up for ourselves as well.
and did you find then there was a different dynamics with your actual mom when you went through this journey? Because now you've reparented yourself. Like, how did that look like in
Yeah,
your
totally. I think there
relationship?
was a point in a few years ago. Well, I'll share a cool story as well. Remind me to share it. Yeah, I definitely accept my mum. My mum gave an answer one day that I typically roll
Mhm.
my eyes at, and I just looked at her and I was like, "This is my mum. Like, I love her. Like, she is who she is. Like, it was just like a full level of acceptance. I didn't need her to be anything other than she is." And it's kind of like on this spiritual path, or, when we're on our self development path and our mum doesn't have our same value sets as us, we can kind of like get a little judgy and be like, "Mum, you should be doing this. Don't drink fluoride, plus, 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 plus." And at the start of our journey, we're kind of like, preaching, but then towards the end of our journey, we're in full acceptance of ourselves, and we can extend that to our mother. And then, to be able to just be in full acceptance of who she is, what her behaviors are, how she's showing up in life, creates, an actual true connection between your parents, which is really, really beautiful. And then when I did ayahuasca the first time, my little brother hadn't spoken to my mum for a number of years. Sorry, bro and mum, if this is too much information, but they had a bit of a tiff going on and they hadn't spoken
Oh,
to each other for a while. And my little brother just texted me the morning after ayahuasca. I just text mum, and I was like, why? And he's like, I got no idea. I just did. And it was like, whatever was in the lineage, whatever was stuck between them two, ayahuasca just like cleared out. And, this is the potential of plants aren't just like healing our own physical body. There's like, I've lived experience and proof of it, healing my lineage, and supporting deep connection between my mum and my brother, which, they have a really thriving and loving relationship as well too. So, you know, their connection that they were lacking has now been like, healed and moved through, and possibly could be really deeply related to doing ayahuasca as well. So yeah, if you're listening out there and you're hearing and you're like receiving messages about psychedelics at the moment, yeah, choose it, open up to it, and allow it to come to you in a great format that feels good and feels safe for you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that intimate family story of yours. That for someone to yeah, that sounds that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense,
Yeah, yeah.
with your mom and your brother. So, thank you so much for joining today and for being so honest and for the work that you do. I'm so it's just excited. Obviously, cannot wait to see where this unfolds and how you can continue to help the world heal on such an extreme level. So thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
And for anyone who wants to reach out to you, you're welcome. Anyone who wants to reach out to you, follow you more on your journey, where can they find you?
Probably Instagram is the best place. Just like Matthew Bruce, and you know, if you'll see that Lucy and I are friends. So if you're not following me, you're not following Lucy. So go follow Lucy as well. But yeah, Matthew Bruce on Instagram. I've got some pretty cool info in my bio at the moment around microdosing as well too. So I've got some information, some studies, some PDFs, etc., and some really great resources in there.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'll make sure I put everything in the show notes for everyone to see. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining today. It's been an absolute pleasure, an honor to have you on again and to see your beautiful face. So thank you for joining today.
Thank you.